May 29, 1453. The walls of Constantinople have stood for over 1,000 years. They have repelled Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Crusaders. On this day, they fall. Cannon smoke chokes the air. The last emperor, Constantine XI, dies fighting in the breach, alone, unrecognized, his purple cloak torn from his body by looters who do not know they have killed a basileus. Inside the Blacherne palace, panic is absolute. Servants flee, guards throw down weapons, and in a sealed chamber high in the imperial apartments, a 17-year-old girl hears the city die. Princess Theodora Paleologima, niece of the dead emperor, last female of the direct imperial line, has never left the palace walls. She has been raised on Greek poetry, Orthodox theology, and the certainty that Constantinople is eternal. Now eternity is measured in minutes. The doors burst open. Ottoman soldiers flood the corridor. Theodora does not scream. She stands, clutching an icon of the Virgin, and waits. They do not kill her. They do not rape her in the hall. They bind her wrists with silk cord, not rope, silk, and lead her through burning streets to the tent of the 21-year-old Sultan who has just become master of 2 continents. Mehmed II does not look at her like a conqueror looks at spoil. He looks at her like a collector looks at a rare manuscript. What happens next is not written in any European chronicle. Ottoman court records list her only as the Greek girl of imperial blood. Byzantine refugees in Italy whisper her name in horror. Venetian spies send coded letters home. For the next 19 months, she lives inside Topkapi, not as prisoner, not as concubine, but as something history has no word for. A living relic, a warning carved in flesh, an experiment in how to kill an empire without killing its last symbol. This is the story they tried to erase. The fall of Constantinople was not the end of Theodora's story. It was the beginning of its erasure. When the Janissaries dragged her from the palace, she expected death. Instead, she was placed in a curtained litter surrounded by mounted guards who spoke a language she barely understood. The journey to Mehmed's camp took less than an hour. The city she had never left was now a graveyard behind her. Inside the Sultan's tent, silk walls glowed with lamplight. Mehmed sat on cushions, still wearing the armor he had worn on the walls. He was 21, lean, dark-eyed, already growing the beard that would become iconic. He did not rise. He studied her the way a scholar studies a manuscript, slowly, without haste. "You are the last Paleologina," he said in perfect Greek. It was not a question. Theodora did not answer. She had been taught never to speak to barbarians. Mehmed smiled thinly. "Your uncle died well. I gave orders that his body be found and buried with honor." Again, silence. He gestured. A servant brought a silver tray with bread, dates, rosewater. Theodora did not move. Mehmed's voice remained calm. "You will not be harmed, not yet. You are too valuable." That night, she was taken to a guarded pavilion within the camp. Silk bedding, oil lamps, female attendants, Turkish women who spoke no Greek. They bathed her, dressed her in clean silk, left food she did not touch. She spent the night kneeling before an icon she had managed to keep hidden in her robes. At dawn, the camp moved. Constantinople was no longer safe for the Sultan. Plague had already begun in the streets. The army marched north toward Adrianople. Theodora traveled in the same curtained litter, guarded by eunuchs. She saw nothing of the journey, only heard the hoofbeats, the creak of wagons, the distant chants of soldiers singing victory songs. In Adrianople, she was installed in the old Byzantine palace Mehmed had claimed as his residence. Not the harem, not a dungeon, a suite of rooms overlooking gardens with marble floors and silk hangings, guards at every door, female attendants who spoke broken Greek. Books were brought, Greek books, Aristotle, Plato, the Gospels. Mehmed visited once a week, always alone, always in the late afternoon when light slanted through the windows. He never touched her, he never threatened her. He asked questions about her uncle's last days, about the defenses of the city, about her faith. Theodora answered in monosyllables. She had been taught rhetoric. She knew how to say nothing while speaking. Mehmed never raised his voice. He listened, he nodded, he left. After 3 months, the visits became conversations. He brought maps, showed her the extent of his empire, spoke of Alexander, of Caesar, of Constantine. "Your city was great once," he said. "It will be great again, under a different name." Theodora said nothing, but she listened. She had no choice. The alternative was isolation, and isolation was beginning to break her. She had not spoken to another Greek in months. The attendants were kind, but distant. The books were in Greek, but reading them felt like speaking to ghosts. Mehmed noticed her hunger for language. One day he brought a priest, an Orthodox priest who had converted to Islam. The man spoke Greek perfectly. He prayed with her. Theodora wept for the first time since the fall. The priest never returned. Mehmed explained, "I cannot allow division in my house." Yet he continued the conversations. He asked about icons, about the filioque clause, about the schism of 1054. Theodora answered carefully. She sensed a pattern. He was not interested in theology. He was interested in fracture, in weakness, in how faith could be turned against itself. One afternoon he asked the question she had dreaded. "Do you believe your God has abandoned you?" Theodora looked at him for the first time without lowering her eyes. "No," she said, "I believe he has abandoned you." Mehmed laughed, not in anger, in recognition. "Perhaps," he said, "but I am still here, and your empire is not." That night she carved a small cross into the wooden frame of her bed, hidden, invisible unless you knew where to look. It was the first mark she made. It would not be the last. By the end of 1453, Mehmed had moved the court to Constantinople, now officially Istanbul. Theodora was brought in a closed carriage at night. No procession, no announcement. She entered the old Blachernae palace through a side gate. The halls she had known as a child were changed, crosses removed, mosaics plastered over. Yet her rooms were prepared with care. Byzantine furniture, Greek books, and icon of the Virgin hanging on the wall. Mehmed never explained why he kept her alive. Some historians later speculated political leverage. A living Paleologina could be married to a vassal prince, used to legitimize Ottoman rule over former Byzantine lands. Others suggested personal fascination. Mehmed was known to collect rare manuscripts, ancient coins, Greek scholars. Theodora was the last living link to the empire he had destroyed. Keeping her was like keeping the head of an ancient statue. Yet the sources, scattered, fragmentary, suggest something darker. Venetian diplomats in Istanbul wrote home in cipher. The Greek girl is kept in honor, yet never seen in public. The Sultan visits her chambers frequently. She is said to be untouched, yet changed. Changed. That word appears again and again. A Genoese merchant who had access to palace servants reported, "She speaks little. Her eyes are empty. She prays in secret. The Sultan allows it, perhaps because it amuses him." Mehmed did allow her to pray. A small chapel was built in her quarters, unmarked, hidden behind a false wall. An Orthodox priest was brought once a month, always blindfolded. He heard her confession, gave communion, left. Theodora never asked for release. She asked for news. The priest brought whispers from the Greek world in exile. The despotate of Morea still held. Her cousins still fought. She listened. She memorized. She carved dates into the wood beneath her bed, small notches, a calendar no one else could read. In 1454, Mehmed began using her in diplomacy. Not publicly, never publicly. He invited Byzantine refugees, those who had surrendered, to the palace. They were brought before Theodora, told to kneel, told to swear loyalty to the Sultan. She sat silent on a cushioned chair, dressed in Byzantine purple, a living icon of what had been lost. Some wept, some refused. Those who refused disappeared. Those who knelt were given positions, tax collectors, translators, minor governors in former Byzantine lands. Theodora never spoke during these audiences. She did not need to. Her presence was the argument. "Look," the Sultan seemed to say, "the last princess lives. She lives under my protection. Submit, and you may live too." In private, Mehmed asked her opinion. "Should I execute the holdouts in Morea?" Theodora answered once, "Kill them and you make martyrs. Let them live and you make collaborators." Mehmed smiled. "You think like a ruler." He did not kill them. He offered terms. Most accepted. The despotate fell in 1460. Theodora's cousins were beheaded in Constantinople. Their heads were displayed on the walls. She was not allowed to see them, but she was told. That night she carved another cross, deeper, more angry. The notches beneath her bed now numbered over 400. In 1455, Mehmed married her, not in a mosque, not in a church, in a private ceremony in the palace. No priest, no witnesses except the Sultan's closest advisors. Theodora wore Byzantine purple. Mehmed wore Ottoman red. The marriage was never announced. It appears only in one Ottoman register, union with the daughter of the Greeks for the stability of the realm. Theodora did not resist. Resistance would have meant death, or worse, public humiliation. She understood the calculation. Alive, she was a symbol. Dead, she was a martyr. Married, she was neutralized. The title Sultana was never given her. She remained the Greek princess in palace correspondence. Yet she lived in the harem, not as concubine, as wife of the Sultan. She had her own apartments, her own servants, her own chapel. And every Friday, after prayers, Mehmed came to her rooms. They spoke in Greek. He asked about theology, about history, about her faith. She answered, not because she wanted to, because she had to. Silence would have been interpreted as defiance, and defiance would have cost her the chapel, the priest, the right to pray. So she spoke, and in speaking, she preserved something, a thread of continuity, a whisper of Byzantium inside the heart of the Ottoman Empire.
The years 1456 to 1458 were the quietest. Mehmed campaigned in Serbia, in Bosnia, against the Hungarians. Theodora remained in Constantinople. She was allowed to write letters to her cousins in Morea before their execution, to exiled Greek scholars in Italy. The letters were read by palace censors. Nothing political was permitted. Yet she wrote, carefully, in code. small references to psalms that carried hidden meaning to those who knew scripture. "The light shines in the darkness," she wrote once, quoting John. The censor passed it. Mehmed read it, smiled, allowed it. He was building something larger than conquest. He was building legitimacy. A living Palaiologona at his side was proof that the old empire had submitted, that the new empire was its rightful heir. In 1458, Mehmed began a new project. He rebuilt the Church of the Holy Apostles, Constantine's mausoleum, as his own mosque. Theodora was brought to see the construction, blindfolded until the last moment. When the cloth was removed, she saw domes rising where Christian tombs had stood. She said nothing, but that night she carved another cross, deeper than any before. In 1460, the despotate of Morea fell. Her cousins Thomas and Demetrius surrendered. Demetrius gave his daughter to Mehmed as a wife, another princess, another symbol. Theodora met her once. The girl was 14, terrified. Theodora held her hand, whispered a prayer. The girl converted within months. Theodora never judged her. She understood. Survival is not betrayal, it is endurance. In 1461, Mehmed took Trebizond, the last Greek empire. Another princess, Maria of Trebizond, was brought to the harem. Theodora met her too. They spoke in Greek when no one listened. They prayed together in secret. They carved crosses together. Small acts of defiance, invisible, yet accumulating. By 1465, the harem register listed 3 Greek women of imperial blood, all converted on paper, none broken in spirit. Mehmed knew. He allowed it, perhaps because it amused him, perhaps because he understood that total erasure leaves nothing to rule over. A living symbol, even a resistant one, is still a symbol. In 1470, Mehmed began planning the conquest of Otranto. Italy was next. Theodora heard the plans. She heard the names of the commanders. She memorized them. She wrote them in code on scraps of parchment hidden beneath floorboards. She did not know if anyone would ever find them. She wrote anyway. In 1471, she fell ill, fever, coughing blood. Mehmed summoned the best physicians, Jewish, Christian, Muslim. They treated her. She recovered, slowly. During her illness, she asked for a priest. Mehmed refused. Instead, he brought a scholar, a converted Greek. The man read scripture to her. Theodora listened. When the scholar left, she carved a final cross, larger, deeper. Beside it, in tiny letters, "We endure." She was 35. She had lived longer than her uncle, longer than her cousins, longer than the empire she had been born to represent. In 1475, Mehmed took Kaffa in Crimea, another Greek community erased. Theodora heard the reports. She prayed for the dead. She carved another notch. In 1481, Mehmed died. Poison, some said. Natural causes, others claimed. Theodora was 39. The new Sultan, Bayezid II, did not visit her. She was moved to older apartments, fewer servants, less food, no more books, no more priest. Yet the chapel remained, the crosses remained, the scraps of parchment remained. She lived another 6 years, in silence, in darkness, in endurance. When she died in 1487, no record marks the date, no funeral is mentioned. Her body was buried somewhere within the palace grounds, unmarked. Yet the crosses she carved survived, hidden, silent, waiting. In 2015, restoration work in Topkapi uncovered a sealed chamber. Inside, crosses, dozens, carved with fingernails, with shards of pottery, with desperation. And beneath one large cross, 4 words in Greek, "We endure." Beside them, a small bird, Theodora's last signature.
The empire that tried to erase her failed because she refused to disappear.
The story of Theodora is not in any standard history textbook. It survives in fragments. A name in a harem register, a coded letter in Venetian archives, a whisper in Byzantine exile writings, an entry in an Ottoman palace inventory, Greek princess, imperial blood, deceased 1487. No cause of death, no funeral rites, no grave marker. Yet the crosses remain, the words remain. We endure. Bayezid II ruled for 31 years. He fought wars, built mosques, expanded the empire, yet he never erased the chamber. Perhaps he never knew it existed. Perhaps he knew and chose to leave it. A silent acknowledgement that some things cannot be destroyed. In 1517, Selim I conquered Egypt. The last Abbasid caliph surrendered the title to him. The Ottoman Sultan became caliph, protector of the holy cities, ruler of the Muslim world. Yet in the old palace in Istanbul, in a sealed room few knew existed, crosses remain carved into stone by a woman who had watched an empire die and refused to let its memory die with it. In 2015, archaeologists stood in that chamber. They photographed every mark. They published papers. They debated authenticity. They argued over meaning. Yet none of them could answer the simplest question: how long did she keep hoping? The wax traces suggest years. The depth of some carvings suggests desperation. The bird beside her last words suggests memory. She carved not for escape. She carved for remembrance. She carved because someone, someday, might look backward and find her. You just did. The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1922, 6 centuries, 3 continents, countless wars. Yet in the end, it was those scratches on the wall that outlived it. Not the cannons that broke Constantinople, not the armies that conquered the Balkans, not the sultans who ruled from Topkapi. Just 4 words and a bird, carved by a woman who had nothing left but her faith and her fingernails. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. It is from the Gospel of John, a verse about light that cannot be overcome. Theodora carved those words knowing she would never leave that palace, knowing her name would be forgotten, knowing the world would move on without her. Yet she carved them anyway, because she understood what empires never do. You can conquer cities, you can rewrite maps, you can erase names from chronicles, but you cannot erase what people carry inside them, and you cannot erase what they etch into stone. Her story is not about victory. It is about endurance, about how one woman, stripped of everything, family, empire, freedom, still found a way to leave a mark that waited 500 years to be found, a mark that says, we were here, we prayed, we resisted, we endured, and the darkness did not overcome us. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe some voices deserve to be heard even after centuries of silence, then subscribe to Mythic Chronicles of Old, because history is not written by the victors alone. Sometimes it is scratched into stone by those who refuse to vanish, and sometimes it waits, just waits, for someone to look backward and remember. Thank you for listening. The light still shines, and the darkness has not overcome it.